So welcome back to the Property Corner. We're going to be doing a bit of an update and a thank you. So we've reached 4,000 subscribers. That's a huge milestone for us as the Property Corner. So thank you for that. Thank you for liking and subscribing to our channel. And today, that was the primary reason for this video, is to say thank you. The support that you guys have shown us over the last 2 years has been tremendous, and a heartfelt thank you for subscribing and motivating me and the team to do better, to come up with new content, to challenge the way that we're doing things and to improve. So we've got some exciting news coming in 2025. We'll be sharing that in a different video. But I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your support. And then just also look back at some of the latest comments that we've had and interaction that I've had with yourselves over the last sort of 3 months, and pick up on some of the comments that maybe engaged or ended up in some form of engagement, and maybe some of the things that I've missed to explain in a better way. Often I feel like if one person has the courage to ask the question, there's very often more people who have the same question. So let's jump right into that. Welcome to the Property Corner with myself, Rowan Alexander. So one of the questions that came about was from Wezo. It was about being a first-time buyer, having 200,000 Rand in savings, whether that money should go into the access bond, or maybe part of it into the access bond. There was also discussion about paying capital gains, and what happens if the access amount becomes more than the outstanding amount. So that's one of the ones that I think is maybe easier to answer in this format. So you guys will know from following the channel that I always recommend that you take the highest mortgage bond that you can get, and then put the cash amount that you have into the bond afterwards. That means that money is always available again on access. The putting it in up front, it can't do any harm. It's not wrong. The only thing that I have against putting it in up front is that you can't, access that money again. If you offer the deposit at the time of registering the mortgage bond, then you don't have any benefit to be able to access that money again. And then that sort of payment has no relation to capital gains. So capital gains tax is calculated on the base value that you paid for the property plus any acquisition costs, and looking at what you sold the property for and any cost of disposal, and then any sort of capital upgrades that you did during that period to determine a net profit. Whether you financed that property or whether you bought it cash or whether you made part payments will have no effect on that profit sum. So you don't have to worry that would have any effect on your capital gains. And then last part of that question was the one around what happens if the value that you have access to ultimately is higher than the outstanding amount. So there'll be a tipping point. At some point in time, you would have paid off more than what the remaining balance is. Remember that the access amount will always only be equivalent to how much you have prepaid on your mortgage loan agreement. So if you were contractually obliged to pay 100,000 Rand and you have repaid 200,000, you would be able to access that additional 100,000. So it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you can settle the loan. You could potentially be at a point where you've prepaid more than the outstanding, and you could settle the loan. That is one option. But there will also be the period where that which you have prepaid is more than the outstanding capital, and you don't necessarily want to settle it because you still want the benefit of having that interest expense and having access to that funds. As you know, making this sort of content isn't easy. We wouldn't be able to do it without the support of our local partners and sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Mortgage for You, a mortgage origination business based in Cape Town that does mortgage bonds right across South Africa. Mortgage for You has been integral in the growth of our business. They've helped us with all the expats from abroad looking to finance property in South Africa, and also assisted our local clients for the past 10 years. Their service is unrivaled. Mortgage for You can assist you with a pre-qualification and also the formal application to the banks. It's always good to get involved with a mortgage originator very early on in the process so they can understand your financial position and make recommendations prior to lodging an application for mortgage finance. Hop over to www.mo4u.co.za to check out their website. You'll find different cost calculators there that assist you in calculating your affordability, bond repayments, transfer costs, and there's also the opportunity to reach out to Esme LaRue, who's the head of that business that will assist you personally with all your mortgage needs. So thank you to Mortgage for You for supporting our channel and for sponsoring this episode. Then My America asked the question, when we about the video or the hidden tools on Property 24, and we looked at pricing, suburbs, areas, and there was a question: what is a common and reasonable reduction for a cash sale? This is something that actually comes up quite a bit more in my general trading rather than on this channel, but it's a relevant question. Is there any benefit to doing a cash sale to the seller? You've got to put yourself in the position of the seller. If you're purchasing cash as a seller, they're not really worried about where your money is coming from as long as you're able to pay. So whether that money is coming from a mortgage bond or cash or from the sale of another property, the source of funds is not necessarily that important because, at the end of the day, it all gets paid to the seller. Where the big difference, however, does come in is that if your cash is unencumbered or if access to that money is easily available. So, if it's subject to the sale of a property and that property registers, you're going to register pretty quickly, or if you have a pre-approved bond and you can maybe execute that pretty quickly, the timing of being able to transfer ownership to the new buyer or to you as the buyer, if you can shorten that period from the typical 3-month period and bring that timing down, there's definitely a cost saving on the seller's side because they won't have to pay the municipal rates and taxes and insurances and possibly interest, whether it be on the loan that they currently have or opportunity cost interest that they, won't be earning. That's definitely a financial benefit. So you could try and quantify that to say, well, we'll be able to execute this process 6 weeks quicker. And for that reason, there should be a reduction in cost equivalent to that saving. That's one of the motivations. And then the other motivator is the fact that the transaction is very often then regarded as conclusive, if you sign a cash sale. However, word of warning, cash sales, there's a lot of people walking around signing agreements of sale stating that it's cash, and they actually never come up with the funds. So there's also some apprehension to enter into negotiations with cash purchasers if they haven't been able to prove the ability to actually pay. How do you overcome that? Then, because obviously you're trying to get some form of a benefit in price reduction. The best advice I can give is to offer a substantial deposit and show your ability to pay and show your commitment to the transaction very early on. If you're going to be buying a property of 3 million rand and you have the 3 million rand in cash, why don't you put R1 million down as a deposit and the remaining 2 million, 2 weeks prior to transfer? That shows your commitment up front. It gives the seller confidence that the transaction can proceed, and probably going to be your best way to negotiating a better deal. Whether that can be linked to a sort of percentage discount, probably not, because that's going to also depend upon where that property is priced at the time of offering. If the property is well priced in a high demand area, even if you're buying cash and even if you can do it in a quicker time period, probably not going to get much of a reduction in purchase price. And then there's another question here from Paulus Bester regarding deposit strategy and whether the banks take this into consideration when determining your interest rate. That was on the video about mortgage bond hacks and future financial flexibility. And the answer is yes, they do. If you're going to be offering a deposit, you do reduce their risk. And for that, they will offer you an incentive, interest rate incentive and reduction. However, that benefit might be, you need to weigh up the benefit, because if you're going to be offering that deposit, remember you don't have access to that cash again. And very often, especially if it's an investment property, the interest expense is tax deductible. So you need to look at the marginal benefit that you're getting from that interest rate reduction and compare it to having that cash available and having access to that cash if you need it. So yes, there's definitely merits to that thought train, and circumstances where you want to offer that deposit up front to get the better interest rate. I've just found that the marginal benefit is very seldom lucrative enough to you convince me to part with my cash and never have access to that money again without actually selling the property. Brett Smitsdorf asked, we actually just made a comment to say, excellent video, helped me not sell my 2 apartments. And that was based on the video, are buy-to-let properties still a good idea? And Brett, I'm glad that you opted not to sell, that I could maybe help you change some of your perspective. So good luck. Keep building that property portfolio and keep us updated, how that goes and how the rental properties treat you. Peter Loebscher asked a question also on the buy-to-let property video about whether it's best to create a entity and register the property in the entity rather than in your own name. And he specifically brought up a scenario where there's multiple owners. There will be some form of co-ownership. If you've watched the videos that I've done on that, you'll find that that's one of the instances where I believe using an entity is a very effective solution. Entities allow for flexibility in co-ownership, and flexibility and options in the property game are one of the biggest ways to actually make money, because if you don't have to change your mind, meaning you don't have to transfer ownership of the property, you don't have to reapply for bonds, things like that. You don't have the cost of disposing and acquiring the property, and you can execute different options. You'll know what my sentiment is upon that. That's worth a lot of money, and that's very valuable. So in the form of where there's co-ownership, especially when it gets to investment properties, that's one of the situations where an entity really makes sense. Entities don't always make sense. So, if you want some advice in that regard, reach out. We can set up a consultation. But this is probably one of the better scenarios where a entity can be used. Voodoo Illusions 7219 made a comment on what to expect with the rental market in South Africa in 2025 on that video. And the comment was a pretty topical one. The comment says, just a little too risky to buy property in South Africa right now due to the government and expropriation issues. So alarm bells, ding, 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 every news article that you've picked your phone up, every social media post, if you don't know about this, you've probably won't be seeing this video, to be honest. So big debate. Expropriation without compensation, amendment to the expropriation bill. Big news at the moment. I've laid off, commenting on that too much, because I did a lot of research and a lot of publication on the issue back in 2018 or 2018, when the bill was first discussed and was open for comment. So if you want to know more about that, you can easily pop over to our website, do a search on it, search my name, Rowan Alexander, and the expropriation bill. You'll find some content that I've done. At that point in time, when the bill was being circulated, I attended a lot of conferences, including one with the public prosecutor, Tuli Maranzela, as well as with Professor Nick Fink. And they really did a deep dive into this issue of expropriation, the impact that it will have on our residential property market. There were a lot of fears about second properties and primary residences, being subject to this expropriation. And I can, with certainty, tell you that I've educated myself enough in that topic that I don't want to get into this debate of almost the sort of uninformed euphoria that's going around and discussions that are happening and really some proper mudslinging. While I have my own opinions about these things, I think the reality of the matter is that you don't have to worry. As a primary resident or an investment property holder, these are not the properties that are typically being targeted, and that, within our constitutional rights, there are still provisions and processes that need to be followed. And One of the prime examples that have been used but have also been disputed are things like abandoned properties, properties owned by the state themselves, that are being underutilized, not used. I often say this, even if you just look in the Western Cape, very often some of our best land is held by departments that have no intention or haven't been using them. Up until recently, there's been no new schools built in the northern suburbs of Cape Town. Only in the last couple of years have you seen that coming about. And some of the best land that is still open in our suburbs belongs to the Department of Education, whether it be provincially, nationally. These are typical properties where some form of expropriation for an alternative use may potentially be in the public interest. So I think there's enough coverage about that elsewhere with people that are specialists in that field, that I'm just as a trader, as an investor, as an agent in this market, I'm comfortable to know that I can confidently continue trading without those fears being irrational. Adele Visser made a comment, asked a question about what if she buys cash. This was on the episode where we dealt with purchasing property in South Africa from abroad. And I've had one or two of these questions in follow-up consultations that I've had with expats. Buying cash from abroad, you're welcome to do that. It has no effect on the transaction. You can do that. There's no restriction on that. You've just got to ensure that you bring the money into South Africa, obviously, because that's where the payment needs to be made. And whether you are a foreign national or a South African temporarily abroad or permanently abroad, property can be bought cash in South Africa. Just a note on that, we have the South African Property Expat Network group on Facebook. If you want to be a part of that, you can search for it on Facebook, subscribe, or and join the group. It's something that we haven't gotten around to providing sort of valuable content in the way that we would like, and we've held off on it a bit until we are in a position where we can give that more attention. And 2025 is definitely, that's one of the things on the radar. So if you are an expat, if you're interested in having more of these discussions, a lot of them will be happening on that group. So to those people who have already joined the group and possibly haven't seen any interaction, it's been intentional. I know it's not what you were hoping for, but we will ramp that up in 2025. JD asked a question about the mortgage bond hacks and future financial flexibility. Which websites are we using for calculations? JD, there's a lot of different websites that you can use for these sort of calculations. I particularly in that video use the bond galleries calculators. But if you do a quick search online for mortgage bond repayment calculators, amortization calculators, lump sum deposit, mortgage bond lump sum deposit calculators, additional payment calculators, you'll find a lot of these different ones available online. As again, in my video, I use the bond galleries calculators. There are a number of different websites that you can use for that. They are pretty freely available. James Black made probably one of the more controversial comments, asking whether there's anyone else who wishes for interest rates to stay high or go even higher in 2025. I think that was met with a lot of shock. But to put it into perspective, James was coming from the position of an investor, saying, yes, while interest rates are high and the cost of credit is high, one thing that he does touch on, and which is true, is that in periods of high interest rate cycles, property prices are suppressed because the ability to purchase is diminished. The buyer's market is put under more pressure. And for that reason, you could potentially buy properties at better value. However, if you can time that correctly, like now, where we're heading off the peak of the interest rate cycle, you may still have some of those remnants of the low pricing, and you might be timing it perfectly to buy with the interest rate cycling downwards. So I think he's trying to get that final bargain in. Ruben Kotze asked a question about VAT, and the question has multiple layers in terms of answering, and I answered a part of it. And then there was a further discussion, which I haven't touched on again, and I'll use this opportunity. So it was about buying buy-to-let properties in a company. That was the particular video. The question was, when buying from a VAT-registered seller, If you buy through a VAT-registered company, would I be able to claim the VAT back? Yes, I would have to pay the VAT when disposing of the asset again, but the goal is to hold for the long term, please advise. And my response was, just remember that residential rental is exempt from VAT. Commercial properties, this can be done, but not on residential, meaning you can charge VAT on commercial rental, but you can't charge VAT on residential rental. So that was the part that I answered. What's subsequently transpired is that he's also, and the part that I didn't answer was about the ability to claim the VAT on the purchase and then repay it at a later point in time when you sell, having to pay across the VAT. Yes, that can be done. And there could potentially be a cash flow benefit because you can claim back part of the purchase price, after acquiring it. Just be mindful. The message that I was trying to get across is, because it did seem that answer, he had sort of answered himself in that way. But yes, you can claim the VAT on the purchase, and yes, you will need to repay it when you sell. You'll have to pay VAT, and that will obviously, the net VAT will be on the appreciated amount. But just be mindful again that any expenses incurred upon operating that property. So all of your typical expenses you won't be able to claim the VAT on those expenses too, because the income form that it would be offset against is not VATable. I think that was so maybe just some clarification on that. Then one of the other things that is a lesser known fact is that if you are a VAT vendor and you purchase the property with the intention of developing it, so you're going to be buying it as trading stock. This is one of the things that I think Ruben was alluding to, because that would be the circumstances under which you can claim VAT. Even if you buy from a non-VAT vendor and you pay transfer duty, you can still claim deemed VAT. So remember that if you're buying it with the intention of it becoming stock to develop and to resell, to improve and resell, even if you're buying from a non-VAT vendor, if you're paying transfer duty, you can pay the transfer duty and claim back the deemed VAT. Those of you who know the automotive trade is very much the same. When they buy a second-hand car, they can, even if it's from a non-VAT vendor, they can claim what's referred to as deemed VAT. If you want more advice on that, speak to your accountant or anyone who's dealing with your taxes, and they'll be able to explain that to you better and more thoroughly in your own position. Because just be careful that you're not claiming back VAT on a property that's purchased that shouldn't be allowed. Okay, then we had a comment from Kayla Somoy on the short video about lowering your mortgage repayment. So actually, extending your loan terms. So taking a 30-year loan rather than 20, paying, the equivalent of the 20-year mortgage loan, so that you're paying back more than you contractually obliged. And by that way, you building up a access facility. But besides that, just the main intention was, getting that mortgage payment lower. You can extend your term to be able to afford that repayment now. As time goes by, you can bump up your repayments. And Kayla Somoy, sy taal was nie so mooi nie, maar sy sê watter Kayla, as jy dit nie verstaan nie, dan weet ek nie hoe om dit vir jou beter te verduidelik nie, maar dalk moet jy maar weer gaan kyk. Voorspoed. Then there was a comment on my residential to commercial property in South Africa part 2 video, where I'm tracking a property investment that I've made. I'm going through rezoning process, and I'm going to be building in this year. There was quite an extensive comment from Bonolo Patience Sebejo, saying they've purchased the property, looking at rezoning it to a multi-let, giving a big background, and then asking the question, at the moment, I'm trying to figure out if I want to build a double story or add some flats. Can I get away with applying for a consent use instead of going through the whole rezoning journey? That's going to depend upon your current zoning rights and also the local municipality with whom you're dealing, under whose laws you fall. So, for instance, in the city of Cape Town, as we've said, the primary use right was adapted the consent use was adapted, so you could add a second and third property without actually going through a rezoning process. You can't sell them individually; they'll still be on one title, but that isn't, for instance, that's something that can be done locally. Whether you can do that in wherever you are based, you'll need to speak to a town planner, architect, an industry expert in your area to be able to advise you. But just a reminder to those of you considering that sort of thing, you don't always need to go through a rezoning application. In some areas, you may potentially have to go through land use management, but in other areas, it's simply submitting a building plan and executing them once approved. Another question that came through on the joint ownership and buying property together in South Africa video came from Madimulusi, asking, you've always wondered whether joint bonds, the bank actually takes 50% from the one purchaser and 50% of the other from the other purchaser's bank account. No, they will require a single payment. So whether that is from one of your primary accounts or whether that's a separate account that you set up, the bank will only do one debit order from a single account. Then we had a comment on the first-time home buyers tips in South Africa, the short. Someone tried to hijack the channel. So saying, you want to buy property in Odisha in India, please contact me. No, we want to buy property in South Africa. There was a comment from Vainant Helfrich about using your second, so say your primary residence is paid off, but you've still got access to a loan, using that money to buy a investment property. It can be done. Just remember that from a taxation perspective, it's always going to be better to have the loan registered on the investment property, because then it's connected and linked to the property that's generating the income. Remember, for every expense that you want to claim, there needs to be a income, which it needs to be set off against. So if your interest expense is on your primary residence and your income is being generated through your investment property, it may not be that easy to actually get the interest expense approved by SARS. Then we've got a comment on the mortgage bond hacks for future financial flexibility video. It's actually become a bit of a discussion point. I didn't engage in that because there was, it looked like you guys were answering yourself to a certain extent. But just on that, so we spoke about, prepaying, getting ahead, building up some access to finance and so on. And there was a comment saying, I've been doing this for years on my investment properties. It was from Justin Grobler, Bluff, Eco Park 1072. Sure. To add my 2 cents, in addition to the above, I pay my bonds weekly, renegotiate my interest every 2 years, and pay my first installment a day or two after the bond is registered. So there's a lot in that, and I think there's a lot of things being, there's some good advice, but there's also some misconceptions in there, and this triggered a whole discussion of other things which you might have seen me speak about before. There's this whole idea that if you break your installments up into part payments and you pay bi-weekly instead of monthly, and if you pay, then you get people saying, well, I pay every week, and then you get people saying, well, I divide mine into 365 payments and I pay one payment every day. There's this idea that if you break your monthly installment up into smaller installments, that you save some form of interest. It's not true. Just doing that does not save your interest. Remember, interest is calculated on the outstanding balance daily. So any amount that you prepay, whether you're paying it 2 weeks in advance, a day in advance, a month in advance, will always save you interest. Okay, but simply splitting the payment doesn't necessarily lead to a reduction in interest or a saving in interest. It's the action of prepaying. So if you have 5,000 Rand at the beginning of the month, don't wait to pay it in 2 installments, pay it up front, because you'll have that interest rate saving immediately, from the day that you've transferred that money across. So if you find yourself in a position where you have the next installment available already, pay it today. Don't wait. Don't break it up. Don't pay it over numerous payments thinking that that's going to be some sort of miracle. Your interest is calculated on the outstanding capital balance daily, and then it is billed 30 days, for a 30-day period in arrears. So meaning, if you make a payment today you will pay the interest cost for the previous or the preceding 30 days on the debit order. So at no point in time would you actually be able to get ahead of that cycle, because you can't prepay your interest expense. You'll be paying off some form of capital. So yes, where I say there's truth in that is any form of prepayment would equate to an interest saving. But this idea of splitting payments, and that by simply splitting payments, being able to reduce your interest cost by 2/3 and stuff like this that I've heard online, it's not true. EduExplo 4110 asked the question, Rowan, do you offer mentorship? Something on that, I've always said this, I offer advice and my time. So if you want to book a consultation, reach out to us on the channel, reach out to us through our agency, and I will gladly offer some of my time to listen to your scenario, give you advice and try and put you on the right direction. I'm not offering any form of mentorship. So, there's no subscription model for mentorship or things like that. I unfortunately cannot dedicate my time. If I do sell a mentorship, I need to be available, and I need to be accountable to, those people that I'm mentoring. And as this is not my primary job, I'm unable to do this at this stage. So my advice is free of charge. My time is free of charge. And I'm doing this for the love of what I do, and also in part of my brand building and marketing. So, yes, to answer you, I offer mentorship in the form of advice. It's at no cost. You can book a consultation with me, and whether you do that once, whether you do it once a year, whether you do it once a month, and whether it's in the form of a video call, in person, telephone call, WhatsApp conversation, I'm open to that, and I will gladly help where I can for as long as I can. Philemon Badiba, last comment is about the hidden tools on Property 24 for home buyers, asking the question, if I have a home loan application approved, and so essentially if you're financing the property acquisition, is it compulsory to take out home insurance? Yes. So it's not compulsory to take out life insurance. That's another thing. Life insurance may be a condition from the bank. It may be a condition of their loan where you then have to comply in order to get access to those funds. But property insurance will always be a requirement because they need some form of security. What happens if that house burns down? The bank needs to have their security insured, and they will always request, or they will always require that you have insurance on that property. Thanks, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And again, thanks so much for your support and your engagement. I enjoy this. I enjoy sort of educating and having these discussions and challenging thoughts. So thank you for that. Thanks for showing support. We've hit 4,000 subscribers, and while we might have 80, 90,000 followers on other platforms, this 4,000 community on YouTube is really sort of my treasure, because this is the audience that engages. You, the people that listen and that engage and discuss and really find value in the content that we're creating. So thank you for that. And share this with people who you feel would find similar value. So thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to creating more content this year.